Welcome to Grounds for Conversations. I'm Amber Noble. It's difficult to find common ground when we focus on things we disagree about. But if we take a step back, we realize that we all have things to learn. Grounds for Conversations is a podcast where we dive into a conversation about Scripture, looking at the story in its entirety. This is for the believer, the questioner, the invested, and the searching. I invite you to join the conversation. Also, at the end of this podcast, stick around for an extra shot, a conversation where we discuss everything about nothing. Welcome to Grounds for Conversations. I am Amber Noble, and today I have just a fantastic friend and guest, Pastor Greg Johnson from Restoration Church. Greg, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
All right. So I know that this is not our typical, we get on, we have a conversation, we discuss things, but I just have asked you today to come on and just share a little bit about who you are and how you've gotten to where you're at. And let me explain why.
This is going to be a short episode.
My reasoning on this is I think so often people who are new to the faith or they've been walking with the Lord, but they look at people in ministry and they have this idea, well, I could never do that, or God's never going to use me like that. And they look at people who, because the coolest thing about Restoration Church to me is you guys are just so focused on teaching the word. That everything is founded in Scripture, but it's a place of grace and mercy, come as you are. But we're going to make sure that when you leave, you've got something to chew on, right? And I love that. So when I'm not somewhere on a Sunday, oftentimes I will jump online and attend church online. And I've done so many of the things, your burns, your worship nights, women's ministry, youth camp. So I've gotten to know so much of your church in a really weird way, kind of like through the back door, which is really awkward. But I've seen the integrity of your staff, and I believe that a staff is only as strong as their leader. But that being said, how many people look at that and go, wow, yeah, Pastor Greg, but I could never, and insert whatever. I could never pray like him. I could never study the word like him. My marriage would never look like his marriage. My kids would not be like his kids, whatever. And
people are so disappointed when they hear this story. So, hey, here's what I want to say. If you're watching right now, if I can do it, you can do it.
I love it. And I think that that's the coolest part is I want people to hear not just, because people look at ministers like you and say, wow, this is amazing. But it's because God's good, right? Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about how you got to where you're at, who you are. And my prayer is that when people hear this, they see that the same God that was forming miracles and changing lives in Scripture is the same God that worked through you and the same God that can work through them. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up in the Dallas area. Go Cowboys.
Okay, this podcast is over. No, I'm just kidding.
Graduated from high school in 1985, career musician. Like I always want to be a rock star. And so my senior year, the most beautiful mullet you've ever seen. And so I wrote a class song my senior year. It ended up on Dallas radio. It was the number one most requested song in the area. So I had this 15 minutes of fame. I was convinced that this was my launching point. And it went absolutely nowhere initially. But I ended up leading worship regionally and then all over the nation. So for about 10 years, I was an itinerant worship guy. During that time, I was paying my way through school at North Texas, which paying my way through school meant I was paying for the same classes over and over. Because when Yvonne and I got married in 1990, I was a fifth-year sophomore. And wow. So you can do that math. And I didn't really value education at the time because I was living my dream already. Right. And so I didn't see the value in it. Got married. Ministry was just taking off. I'm traveling all over the place.
Now, was she traveling with you?
She would travel with me some. She had a full-time job.
Okay.
And so, and then we started having kids. And so we had Allie in 1993. And when Katie was born in 1995, man, huge strain on our marriage, being gone all the time.
Yeah.
It led to a really tough time in 95. So I stepped away from ministry for about 18 months in kind of putting our marriage back together, evaluating what do I need to do with my life. And so I worked for my dad for a while, selling printing.
You're still in the Dallas area
at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I never really, I was never more than about 60 miles from where I grew up.
Okay.
Just during this time when I wasn't traveling. And so in 1997, got a call from Jeff Wells, pastor of Woods Edge, which is about 5 minutes from here.
Right, it's the backyard. For
sure.
And
they were a church of about 150.
Wow.
Church plant.
And what year was this?
This was 97.
Okay.
So back to when I was in Dallas, when I was in town, I was considered staff at Prestonwood Baptist, which is like
a huge church,
giga church, 40,000 people. And so I was doing I was a utility worship guy,
right?
Whatever they needed.
Okay. Pause there for a second, because people here listen to this podcast from all over, and people that are not from Texas do not understand how big Texas is. And they don't understand how big church is in Texas. So like that's bigger than certain towns. I mean, like, that's bigger than a city. Oh, well, I grew up in Duncanville, south of Dallas, which had about 35,000 people. So this was about the same size as it's crazy. It's crazy. Okay, so that's just perspective there. I think that people hear that and we just skip over. It's like, whoa, what did he just say? Yes, you heard him right. Well, it's really interesting because I grew up in Southern Baptism, and I say all the time I'm a fully recovered Baptist. No offense to the Baptist, because I owe my salvation to the Baptist Church. Right. But I also owe to the Baptist Church. They really taught me how to hide my sin. And so that was a key theme, growing up, both in the church, in my family, there was this tendency to always look the part. And I was kind of the all-American boy, my boyish good looks and quick wit. I was always the smallest guy in the room. So had to do something to balance that. Yeah. So I was always the sidekick, never the leading man. Right. And so that led to a lot of things for me. I don't think, though, Greg, that's limited to the Baptist, because I grew up in a totally different denomination, same setting. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And I love how you were like trying to avoid saying what denomination you grew up in. So I grew up in the Assemblies of God. Yeah, there we go. There we go. And so throw a little tongues in for us real quick. Not your girl. So they in that process, and then I have friends that, like, one of my best friends grew up, her dad was the pastor of the Nazarene church in town. Mm-hmm. And then I had friends that were Church of Christ, and I had friends that were, the friends that actually were the most laid back were my Catholic friends. It's like, they were the ones that life was a little bit easier on. But they would buy the beer for you. Yes. Or their priest would, right? Yeah. Yes. So what was crazy was I felt like everybody, that was just what church culture has done. Oftentimes has made people feel like, okay, you got saved. Now all your issues have to be swept. We can't. And it hasn't changed much. No, no, for sure. No. I just, I was kind of a spiritual mutt. So grew up in the Baptist church, led worship in an Assemblies of God church in college. Okay. Where I actually learned that worship was kind of alive. Right. In that setting. For sure. I grew up, singing out of a hymn book. Right. Or a hymnal. My bad. So anyway, I was really jacked up. I trusted Christ at 12. I was never a party guy, but I had a real issue with purity, and from the time 6 years old, my dad had pornography in our house. Wow. That was readily available. And such formative years, that 6, 7, 8, 9, those years are huge. And I'm looking at it every day. Wow. And I had no... And your mom wasn't bothered by the fact that it was in the house? Apparently not. I mean, both my parents have passed away now, and I wish that I could ask them more questions. Sure. Sure. Like, hey, I did have a conversation with my dad later in life. Just, hey, you knew I was looking at that every day. Right.
don't you think you should have put those away?
Right.
So
don't you think you should have stopped looking at him too, Dad?
yeah. I mean,
how about we just throw them away?
Lots of issues. So anyway, I had some stuff running beneath the surface that I just did not know what a huge impact it was going to have on my life.
Sure.
So, so now I'm,
6, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
six to 12.
How old are your grandbabies?
My oldest is 8.
And so, think about the innocence that she operates in, and just he has the most beautiful grandchildren. A couple of them are in London, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so these beautiful grandkids, but you look at them at that age and you see the innocence, and to know that at that season of life, you were exposed to this.
Well, and I think about how it wasn't really as readily available as it is today. Today it's a mouse click, and it's in a whole. I mean, I don't know how you could be a teenager, especially a teenage boy, in today's culture and stay pure.
Well, okay, so for 25 years of being involved in student ministry, believe it or not, in the last 10, I have met with almost as many girls as I have boys
it's
that
crazy.
have, and they don't have to go looking for it. It comes to them.
Right.
It's just there. It's like I'm watching a video on TikTok, and then all of a sudden there it is. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. So, it played a major role in, when we got married in 1990, we had not had a great dating relationship, and had not remained pure physically. And so we brought all this baggage into marriage. And I'm bringing baggage that I don't even know was baggage.
Sure.
But had a deep need for validation and wanted to validate me as a man. And I would always say, I just need you to affirm me. But what I really wanted was validation. So we have this rough spot in 95. But I end up on staff at Woods Edge here in the Woodlands.
Okay.
So first time I'd lived outside of the Dallas area.
So you bring how old at this time is Katie?
Katie was 2. So 4 and 2. So we had 2 kids.
Okay.
It was probably, it was such a healing season for us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we grew with the church. So I was 30 years old when I came on staff as the worship pastor. Never really wanted to be on staff at a church because I loved being a lone ranger and traveling. And so now I'm in this church construct, and having grown up in a very, a box, I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
Fell in love with the day-to-day pastoring, being with the same people every week.
Being home with your family.
Being home with my family.
Sure.
And the thing that I learned pretty quickly is you got to stay fresh.
For sure.
Because when I traveled, I did the same 10 songs in every city in America, and now I'm having to keep up with, new music, new trends, teaching people the value of worship.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I'm not the hero anymore that just pops in, does his thing, and leaves.
And then dips, right.
Because people I'm known. Mm-hmm. And that was so great. Enjoyed it so much. Yvonne and I, we had a season where I felt like, okay, we're growing in our marriage, but we had never really dealt with some of the issues that had caused problems back in the mid-90s. And so by about 2007, about 10 years in.
You've also at this point had a third child.
We had a third child in 2000. So now we've got 3 daughters.
Right.
I am a girl dad.
Yeah.
I
beautiful girls.
I speak fluent girl. And so about 2007, things are going great at the church. And I say this a lot, and I say this humbly, but it's just the truth that I was the golden boy at Woods Edge right up until the day they fired me. And so
Did you see the firing coming?
I should have. I mean, when I tell this part of the story, I should have seen it coming.
Okay.
But I was completely out of control.
Okay.
I was, the church was growing. By 2007, we're probably a church of a couple thousand. And, and I'm involved in high level leadership.
Right.
So I'm a part of team that's making decisions. And so again, I'm touching every part of the church.
Right.
Just love and life.
Okay, can we pause there for a second? Yeah. Because I feel like people don't realize, and if they don't realize, they need to realize worship does touch every part of the church. Even if the worship leader / pastor is not in those meetings, worship is the tone that sets everything, right?
And I would say, if you're a pastor listening to this and you're not investing in your worship pastor, if he's a means to an end, he needs to be your closest relationship.
For sure. I also think that we have to learn that it is not a performance and it is not a gig. And when people see worship as another gig, we have a problem, because the worship and I saw this the other day and I can't remember who said it, but worship is the only thing we do that's 100% for God. And you say, no, preaching is, we're preaching, we're discipling, we're being obedient to God, but worship is 100% to him, for him, about him. It's not just teaching the word and going, okay, how do you apply this to your life? So if that's the thing in church that is 100% for God, and it's also the atmosphere setter, we better start taking that serious.
Well, and I would say, we can do a whole separate podcast on
Let's
worship.
do it. I would love to.
Because I see the millennial and Gen Z generation today are so experiential in how they pursue the Lord.
Sure.
Sometimes at the expense of truth.
Right.
That there's a balance there.
Absolutely.
But man, I've seen people's lives literally changed during a worship service without the word ever being read.
Right.
And so there is, man, the Spirit of God. Well, he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants.
Absolutely.
But worship is such an important part. And so, man, while it was an important part, I had become so arrogant that I believed that it was the most important part.
Okay. Yeah.
And when you were mentioning, worship's not just a gig, that has become so in vogue in our culture that you've got incredible musicians that they're hired for their musicianship.
Right.
And,
they're very talented.
Yeah. But they may be lost. And you just think about spiritually coming off the stage, if we've got people on our stages that are not worshipers, that this is not worship unto God, that they're just, collecting a paycheck, man, we got to change that trend.
For sure.
But I would not have valued that in 2007. I was part of the problem. And so, long story short, without going into a ton of detail, because I want to honor my wife in this. We were unhappy, and someone started paying attention to me. And again, I was so messed up because, again, I was the golden boy. Everybody loved me. Everybody was always telling me how great I was. And then I would go home and Yvonne was so unimpressed with me. And
because she's been home with these babies.
Yeah. Well, and when I would challenge her on that, I would say, hey, everybody else loves me. Why don't you?
Right.
And she said, because I know you.
Right. I wash your underwear.
Yeah. I know who you actually are. And she knew that I've spent
Yvonne.
Yeah. She knew I spent 0 time with Jesus. She knew the only time I prayed was on stage.
Wow.
So she knew the real me. And so what I even kind of kept hidden from her was my heart was so dark that within my friend group, most of them on staff at church with me, we cussed all the time. There was sexual innuendo in our conversations, just locker room talk,
right?
Which, Trump has made popular, but I just, for me, the ends justified the means.
Right.
That as long as, people are coming up to me on Sunday morning saying, man, I've never been led in worship like that. Like, I'm just, in my mind, I have convinced myself that, well, this must be it. This must be all there is. That I'm doing what God wants me to do on Sundays, and then I do whatever I want the rest of the week.
Sure.
Obviously that's jacked up.
Right.
Obviously.
But isn't that why it's called deception? Because you don't know you're deceived, or you wouldn't be deceived, right? Like you're in this moment going, oh, this is the way. And on the outside looking back, you're like, what in the world? But in the moment, you're like, I've arrived.
Yeah. And so I got involved in an emotional relationship with one of my wife's close friends. Lasted about a year. It was all very high school, very clandestine. It was all flirtation, text messages, and we were still as couples hanging out all the time. So most of it was taking place right in front of our spouses.
And they didn't pick up on it?
No, I mean, I think Yvonne, she's very discerning, and I think women have a radar where that's concerned. She knew something wasn't right, but never really said much. And so that was in 2008, beginning of 2009. I had someone prophesy over me that had a spirit of disrespect in my life. I knew what she was talking about. It freaked me out.
Sure.
I immediately.
Well, especially going back to I'm a Baptist boy, and then you've got somebody who gives you a prophetic word that you're like, because I think that we the scripture that says they will worship me in spirit and truth, there is something so powerful about the word of God and understanding the word, but there's also something powerful about understanding that the Holy Spirit is still alive and active and moving. And so you bring the truth of the word and the power of the Holy Spirit together.
Oh, yeah. So by this point, I would have.
This word came to you?
Yeah.
Let's just pause there for a second. When that happened, did it make you angry? Were you?
No, I was scared to death.
Were you receptive to it? Were you scared of it, or were you like, okay, I'm embracing this?
Well, I had to embrace it. I mean, because again, it's self-protective.
Sure. Sure.
I'm standing on stage with my guitar on a Wednesday night. She comes up behind me and whispers this in my ear.
On the stage?
Yes. And so, I mean,
and then you had to follow with.
Oh, and I kept kept leading worship, and called this woman the next morning and said, I can't talk to you anymore. And of course she said,
not the prophetic woman, the woman that you were having.
Yeah.
Hey, lady, quit whispering in my ear.
Well, I didn't want anything to do with either one of them, and so
facts.
so it ended as quickly as it started.
Okay.
And my mom had been sick with cancer, and I was back and forth to Dallas in early 2009. She passed away in March of 2009. And so it was an easy distraction.
Sure.
And then we started hanging out with that couple again, and it was like nothing had ever happened. And so for 2 years, we're friends. Her husband was one of my best friends. And in my mind, I'm just thinking, oh, well.
It's all better. It's healed.
Yeah, that was weird. Wonder what that was all about. So at the end of 2010, I am sitting at home, and a good friend of mine, Brian Jenkins, calls me one night and says, hey, we need to meet. I said, oh, are you okay? He said, I'm fine. You're not. I said, what's going on? And all he said was
he on staff?
No, he was just a friend.
Okay.
And all he said was, he knows. And of course I knew exactly who he was talking about and what he was talking about. And I said, how does he know? He said, Greg, he's known for 2 years. So the day that
this man is hanging out with you and knows that you had been having an emotional.
We were driving back and forth to Dallas. He had season tickets to Cowboys games, and
you and the husband,
and we would be alone in a car for 8 hours, to and from, and he never said a word to me. And so Brian had been in a conversation with him, and he had confided in him and told him about this. Did Brian know
before this?
No,
okay.
I had never told a soul.
Okay.
And so I knew that, so the day that I called her and said, we can't talk anymore, she was under such conviction that she went to her husband and told him everything. And so now.
So he knew back then, and they still chose to hang out with you guys.
Yes.
Wow.
So I reached out to him, and we had breakfast, and the first thing he said is, hey, Greg, I forgave you 2 years ago, but our marriage has been changed, and I just want for you and Yvonne what we have. And he said, I'm not going to rat you out. All I'm asking you to do is I want you to do whatever you would counsel someone to do. And so I knew at that point that my life is about to change drastically. I was scared to death, but I was a Class A manipulator, and I was still under the impression that I was going to figure a way out of this. So instead of going to my wife, I went to Jeff, my pastor, told him some version of the truth, the least damaging version of the truth.
Sure.
And
Wow.
Just confessed that I'd had this emotional thing. And within 24 hours, I lost my job. Before I lost my job, he said, "Hey, you're going to need to tell Yvonne today, because by the end of the day, this is going to be very public. And because we've got to meet with the elders and determine what we're going to do." And so I had to tell Yvonne, and
wow.
And so it was brutal. She was done.
Sure.
We'd already struggled, 15 years earlier. And she just said, "I'm not doing this anymore." And so I was positive that we were getting a divorce, that I was going to see my kids every other weekend, that, all of this.
How old were they at this time?
So my oldest was a senior.
Wow. My
middle was a sophomore and already really struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And then Abby was 10. So I'm like at a complete loss. At the time, I had a consulting business called the David Project, and it was birthed because in 2003 at a Wild at Heart retreat, I felt like that God had told me that I was his David.
Okay.
Called me David. And so out of that, just this whole idea that we were developing the next generation of Davids. Right. And we were developing worship leaders. And so I'm sitting on my bed the night after this has all taken place. My life is blown up.
Wow.
And I said to God, "God, I'm your David." And his response to me was, "No, you're Saul. And I'm removing my mantle of leadership from you." And I was already in such a fragile place, no job, marriage falling apart. But when God said, "No, you're done."
Yeah.
I was a little manic, because during all of this, I still had this weird notion that somehow God was going to get me out of this, that somehow this is all going to, and that was like the undoing for me. So I'm feeling desperate. I had a book laying on my bedside, Walking with God by John Eldridge. And it was a signed copy that had been sitting there since 2007 and never opened it. Started reading it. There was a section on agreements that we make with the enemy. And so now I'm fascinated by, okay, what is that all about?
Sure.
And I've gone into way too much detail, but the bottom,
this is good.
The bottom line is, God told me that the agreement that I had made with the enemy was, this phrase, "It's not that big a deal." And took me into all these moments where I justified sin, I'd minimized sin, the way that I talked, I cussed like a sailor, the things that I watched, everything.
The story I told you before, you would have fit in great in the foyer with that little lady who was talking about how good God had been.
100%. I wouldn't have done it in the foyer, but I'd have done it. I'd have done it in my office. Yeah, yeah. So, so I'm all of these things. God's taking me into all of these things, and all these times that I'd be like, "It's not that big a deal.
Right?
It's not that big a deal." And all of a sudden, God said, "Greg, holiness is a huge deal to me." And in that moment, I was undone. I'm weeping, and now I'm just confessing out loud. It's like I'm spewing sewage out of my life.
Right.
And for probably 20 minutes, I'm confessing everything that I can think of, every agreement where it's not that big a deal, all these things that I'd minimized. And all of a sudden, I felt like I got struck by lightning. And I've never been the same since that moment.
Wow.
Never been the same.
Okay, can we talk about that for a second? Because obviously God already knew everything. What was significant to you? No. What is the significance of still confessing it out loud? Knowing that you just got busted. Right. Okay, like you're just fully exposed. But why is it so powerful to say, yeah, I'm exposed, you know everything, but let me go ahead and still tell you anyway?
Well, I mean, if you've got kids, you get this.
Yeah, sure.
So it's almost repeat back to me
what you've done, why you've done this, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we confess to God, it's actually just coming into agreement with him about the way things are.
Right.
So it's just telling the truth.
Right.
And God,
even though he already knows,
he loves it when we tell the truth because it's almost, okay, right.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, we're on the same page now.
Yeah.
And in that moment, we were definitely on the same page. Because, the difference between confession and repentance, confession is telling the truth. Repentance is thinking in a new way about that truth.
Well, yeah, it's an action step.
Yeah. And so it's, it's that 180 turn. Well, in that moment. So, and I'm not saying this for shock value. I can't spell a cuss word today. I mean, it has been such a dramatic, and that's one symptom that my heart has changed.
Right.
But, immediately I'm thinking differently. I'm clear-minded for the first time. And I'm also jobless and probably going to be divorced. And I immediately went to my wife and said, can we talk? I've got nothing to say to you. Can we just talk? I sat down with her. I showed her the book. I asked her to read this chapter in this book. And I said, I don't expect you to believe me. Something has just happened to me. And I know that we're going to get divorced, but I hope one day you can see the godly man that you deserve. And what I didn't know was she had been praying in the closet, weeping, begging God to let her out of the marriage. And God had told her that day, if you leave, the enemy gets your family. Wow. And Yvonne is easily the most stubborn person I know. And
she's pretty cool though,
she's incredible because
she's pretty cool
because her stubbornness saved our marriage.
Wow.
And
so
over the next 24 hours, we had a lot of conversations and she said, hey, I forgive you and we're going to work through this. And so that started a journey. It was very difficult, but we spent 3 years in a healing process. And so this is where restoration comes in. Sorry, I know that we're 58 minutes into this. But,
no, you're good. You're good.
Where restoration comes into this is Jeff, pastor, he's my spiritual dad. He fired me and then met with me once a month without fail and continued to love me, continued to pour into me. And so he would tell me often, hey, I'm jealous for this version of you. I wish I'd worked with this version of you.
Right.
And so we're going through this process of just, he's discipling me in the health. So 2013, I had this vision of planting a church, go back to 5th year sophomore. Right. I don't have the education of just an intelligent person, much less, never been to seminary. And I'm feeling called to pastor a church, in fact, plant a church. And he put New York City out in front of me. And so
don't tell my daughter that that's her favorite city in America. I'm like, you cannot afford to go, much less live.
I was there last month for the first time in 11 years.
She just got back last night. So
favorite place on the planet.
Yeah, her too.
So I go to Jeff and say, hey, I've had this vision. It's a crazy vision, longer story, but I just was so convinced this is what God's calling me to. Fully expected Jeff to give me a little pat and say, hey, buddy, that's not going to happen.
That's not going to be for you.
Do you not know where you've been and what you've done?
And don't you think you feel that way because that's the way the enemy wants us to feel?
Well, of course. I mean, it's the enemy, know this, he is going to hold your past against you every day of your life until you recognize that he actually has no authority over you.
Right. Absolutely.
And so, the lie of the enemy is you can never change. So the minute you bring your sin into the light, he has no power against you.
Right.
And so all of my stuff was very public. Now I'm living, I had an experience with the Holy Spirit in 2012, a year before. And so, man, there's something just completely new and different about me.
Right.
So Jeff, much to my shock, says, Greg, of course that's what you're supposed to do. I affirm it in you. In fact, when you're ready to do it, we'll support it. And so through a process, again, longer story, thought it was going to be New York, tried to get there for a year, sold our house, expecting to move. A year later, Jeff calls me and says, had a dream that we were planting a church locally and that you were the pastor. And we talked about it for a few months. And in June of 2014, the church that hired me to plant Restoration.
Wow. So
the name on the sign is actually my story. Mm-hmm. And so when as we move into, the culture of Restoration is it's a place of healing. We preach verse by verse through books of the Bible.
I love it.
We're not, a thematic. You're not going to see a billboard up in front of our church, 7 steps to a happy marriage. We're gonna teach through the book of Matthew, which we're in right now. We've been in since December.
2017. No.
Yeah. I mean, we spent a year in Revelation in 2020 because COVID was happening and everybody was freaking out. So we spent a year just walking through. Okay, so what does the Bible say about the age to come? And, spoiler alert, you can go through and listen to our study of Revelation, but it's not going to be what you're hoping for because it's not the roadmap to the end times.
Right.
And the whole point of the book is Jesus is coming back to restore everything that was lost.
Right.
All the bells and whistles of the apocalypse and all of it is figurative, and you can't put it on current events and expect it to line up.
Well, and that's the thing that's so crazy is I think the enemy would love to get us to major in the minors. Focus on how's it going to end, but rather we know it's going to end, but there's a new beginning coming and we've got this much time. Tell everybody you know. Yeah. Let's just do that
Is there any doubt that we live in a dark time?
No.
I mean, the world is so incredibly dark. I mean, we just spent 15 minutes talking about pornography, how accessible it is. I mean, we live in a post-Christian nation.
Yeah.
And we need to, light shines brightest in the darkness.
Right.
So we don't need to be huddled up in our churches trying to keep all the bad people out.
Right.
We need to have the doors flung wide open and be speaking truth to people so that they can see the real Jesus.
That's right.
And they can see real people.
That's right.
So I tell my story very openly. It is a part of the fabric of who we are as a church because, hey, we don't celebrate brokenness, but we acknowledge that we're all broken and we're all in process of being healed by Jesus.
Sure.
And so we have a teaching team, and everybody, part of the prerequisite is until you can tell me where you failed to live up to the passage you're about to preach, you're not ready to preach it.
Wow.
So we're going to preach. We're going to bring the stage to the floor as much as possible. Mm-hmm. I know that I've been anointed and called to pastor Restoration. Mm-hmm. It's probably not another church in the nation that would want me to pastor their church.
I think you do a fantastic job at it.
But I am the perfect pastor for Restoration.
Yeah.
And so I always want people to know, hey, we're the same. Mm-hmm. I struggle just like you do. We're in Matthew 12 this last Sunday talking about Sabbath. And I talked about, man, I struggle with impatience. I'm the most impatient person I know. And so to take on rest is so hard for me because I do not like to stop. I guess I've got authority issues because I don't like to sit still. And Jesus is always inviting me into rest. And Sabbath is about rest. It's about soul rest.
Right.
And so to be able to say that from stage that, hey, I lay in bed at night and some nights I can't sleep because I'm so anxious.
Right.
Because I've got so many things on my mind and things that are unreconciled or things I need to do that I haven't done or things I want to do that I haven't done or things I did that I shouldn't have, you know, and everybody can relate to that.
Right.
That, that is a lack of rest.
Yeah.
And so I've got to bring those to Jesus.
Right.
I've got to Matthew 11, 28 through 30. Yeah. Come to me all you are weary and burdened, anxious.
Right.
I mean, anxiety, man, is that not a buzzword in our culture right now?
For sure.
And I will give you rest. And so, our platform is we want to take the truth of Scripture, not out of context, but in its context. We're going straight through a book. And,
I love it.
And during the book, we're going to preach out of the book. Mm-hmm. We're not going to grab current events and try to cram them in here. We're not going to proof text. This is what today's passage says.
Right.
And here's the truth of it. Here's how I relate to it. Here's how I failed to live up to it.
Right.
How about you?
And what I love about it, because we have several friends that pastor, and they teach the way you teach. And what I love about it is you don't have to cram current events. The Word of God is alive and active, and it fits with already where current events are. You're like, whoa, that's happening right now. Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
And it's been happening.
It's forever.
Going back to Revelation, when you really understand Babylon, it's a system.
Yeah.
The original Babylon, the Babylon that's talked about in Revelation, right now, I would make a strong case that, when John was writing the book, Rome was Babylon.
Right.
Today, America is Babylon.
For sure.
It's a system that it's living, in an anti-Christian way.
Right.
So antichrist means the opposite of Christ.
Right.
And we're holding up leaders.
Right.
And calling them Christian when they're not anti-Christ, and so this is not about politics. Like I tell people all the time, I'm a pastor, not a politician. I've got personal views on politics, so hit me up. I'll tell you anything you want to know off of this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But the truth of the matter is, I heard a guy speak last week that was talking about, in today's church culture, we have moved from theology to ideology.
Yes.
And that people are rallying around an ideology.
Mm-hmm.
And I live in maybe the reddest county in the state. And so everyone wants to rally around their ideology that, we want to wrap the American flag around Jesus. And the truth of the matter is, Jesus transcends politics. He transcends governments.
Right.
He appoints leaders according to Colossians 1.
Right.
And so, man, if you want to say he appointed one leader, well, the leader you didn't like, he appointed him too.
Right.
And so,
you even go Old Testament. There's this little lady that they were, I was watching the sermon, and they had like a little bit of a panel, and this lady, very, very old, but very precious. And I don't know if she was like the pastor's mom or what, but she said, well, honey, if God could use Nebuchadnezzar, he can use any one of these jokers that y'all put into office. And I was like, I love her. I want to be her friend.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. We forget that
we've got a very limited view of how God operates.
Absolutely.
That he uses.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He will use the very worst moment of your life. He will redeem it. Mm-hmm. And then he will use that very worst moment. He's sending you back into the burning building to rescue other people who have suffered from the same thing.
Yeah. Wow.
It's 2 Corinthians 1, when Paul talks about, man, we thought we had received the sentence of death.
Right.
And he says that the God of all comfort comforts us in our afflictions so that we can comfort others with the comfort God has given us.
Yeah.
And so we talk a lot about living into our Ephesians 2:10 calling. So, Ephesians 2:10, we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he prepared in advance for us to do, that we've all got a God assignment on our life.
Right.
Jesus is the activator of it, and we're never more alive than when we're living into our calling.
Yeah.
But the intersection of our calling, it's the intersection of our deepest pain.
Yeah.
Most often.
So, for sure. So I would say,
God takes our deepest pain and he lights it on fire and uses it as this manifesto.
So somebody hearing that, though, that sounds terrifying, because it's like, no. Let's just move forward. I don't want God to revisit that place, or I don't want to revisit that place. And I sure don't want the people around me. I've never seen things brought to light where his mercy wasn't present. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, we convince ourselves
that it's going to be worse than it is.
Oh yeah. That if I bring my secret into the light, it will be the end of me.
Right.
And there are consequences. So I lived out
on this side of eternity or on that side.
Yeah.
Facts.
I lived out really, really tough consequences.
Yeah.
And I can say today, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah. Wow.
Because
that's good.
it has changed my life, the trajectory of my life forever. And guess what? The enemy doesn't own me anymore.
Right.
I can lay my head on my pillow at night and drift off to sleep, knowing that I'm not living in secret. I'm
Right.
living in the light.
Right.
And I struggle just like everybody else.
Sure.
So I will say things daily that I regret, that I have to bring to the throne. But I'm not living in habitual sin. I'm not living
Right.
in unconfessed, a secret lifestyle.
Right.
Hey, and let me just say this. I'm going to look at the camera for a second. If you're living in secret, if there's something that you're convinced that if people knew, they wouldn't accept you, that may be true. But man, on the other side of your confession, on the other side of you bringing it into the light, is a freedom that you will never experience anywhere else.
Absolutely.
And so that's really been our platform. And so, we started in a school with 10 families. And, now we've got about 2,000 people in our orbit.
Yeah.
And I say that humbly, but people are attracted to truth. People are attracted to humility. They're attracted to transparency. The number one thing that I hear about restoration is that people are like, man, I'll say something and I can feel the room go, oh, I didn't know we were going to be that honest.
Right. Like, okay.
We're going there. And so I said this a few weeks ago in a message. Hey, I think it was our vision week. I'm like, hey, if you're not ready to live in transparency, you won't make it here, because you will be unnerved because somebody on your left or right is going to share with you their deep, dark stuff.
Right.
And you're either going to feel permission to share yours, or you're going to hightail it out of there because you're not ready to live in truth.
Right.
And either one is fine. There are a lot of great churches in the area.
There are.
And we're probably not for everybody. But I do believe deeply.
But that you might not be for everybody, but what you just said is God's
Absolutely.
desire is for everyone.
And it can happen in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Because it's really not about the culture of the church. It's about the character of the leader.
Absolutely.
And so, you can have a Baptist church that sings from a hymnal every week. But if the pastor has been transformed and is willing to be transparent about his life, it can transcend the stereotypical church culture that we talked about earlier.
Right.
Like church culture is just literally, leader can't come to I can't think of his name right now, but he says, culture eats strategy for lunch. In the church, we would say culture eats vision for lunch, culture eats vision or mission for lunch. And what that means is your culture is who you actually are.
Right.
You can have a mission statement that says, whatever it says, but your culture is who you actually are.
Right.
You can say you're a friendly church, but if people come and go and nobody talks to them, you're not a friendly church.
Right.
So for us, we don't want to say we're transparent. We want to show we're transparent.
Right.
And so every one of our ministries, we do Regeneration, which is a recovery ministry on Sunday nights at 6:30. It's our fastest growing ministry.
Okay. So talk a little bit about that, because there are quite a few young adults in the area that I know are involved in other churches, but it's not you can be involved in another church and still do Regen.
I think our young adult population is probably the largest segment of Regen right now.
Okay.
Growing.
Yeah. But they listen to this podcast. Explain, when you say recovery, people automatically go to substance abuse.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not an alcoholic. I don't have a drug problem. It's like, well, but there's other things.
Right. So I think we tend to, when we think about recovery, we go alcohol, drugs, sex addiction.
Right. And those are the
monikers of the culture.
Right.
So here's my question. Do you have a self-addiction? Are you angry? Are you codependent? There are all of these little nuances. Are you a people pleaser?
Right.
All of these things are things that, depending on, the environment you've grown up in, class A people pleaser. God's delivering me from that every day.
Wow.
And I'm slowly becoming a better leader because I need to care less about what people think.
Right.
And I should only care about what God thinks.
Right.
I think it's Galatians 1:10. Am I a man pleaser or a God pleaser? So I'm on that journey.
Right.
And I still know that, I get eaten up inside when I have to tell somebody no, or when I, because I just want everybody I want you to be happy,
So it's hard for you to tell people no?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
See, that's so crazy, because I would have never thought in knowing you and watching how you interact with people, that would be hard. But that's interesting.
Well, so I'm not afraid of a hard conversation.
And maybe that's why I think that, because
I mean, I like, and I'm a truth teller. Like Yvonne gets so uncomfortable conversations.
She's so funny to me.
Like I
think she's so funny.
So, yesterday I'm in a counseling session with an impromptu counseling session. They were taking a tour of the building, and I asked one question. The wife starts weeping, and I'm like, "Hey, I've got 45 minutes for my next appointment. Do y'all want to talk?" And
hold on. Can I just say, because I've been in ministry for a long time, the fact that you did not say, call the office and schedule an appointment, that you in the moment knew you had time and you took the time when you didn't have to, is huge. I want you to know that.
Oh, well.
That's a big deal. I know too many people would be like, wow, well, we call the office and schedule an appointment. Well, I think I would be guilty of that before.
I mean, in the moment, and I'm not going to say that happens every time, but
I want you to hear that. I want you to know. I think that's pretty rad.
Well,
because
you.
But they're walking through your church and this is the new sanctuary, and they're like, you're like, okay, let's talk.
Yeah, I mean, there's a weeping wife and a man that seems emotionally disconnected, and
and they're touring the church.
Yeah, they just started coming. So, okay. but the bottom line is, out of sheer intrigue, I wanted to know, hey, what's going on here? So I pull them into my office, and so I have a fundamental belief, because I'm not a counselor, that I don't need 10 sessions to get to the bottom of it. So I'm just going to ask the hardest question first.
Right.
And so about 15 minutes into it, she's like unloading. He is starting to engage. And I said, and they mentioned Christian counseling, and said, so you're seeing a counselor? And they said, yeah, but I mean, truthfully, we've gotten more out of the last 15 minutes than we have in the last, 6 sessions. And okay, that's great. So I know that part of my anointing is that for whatever reason, I'm able to say hard things to people, and they typically receive.
Well, you're pastoring them.
Yeah, I mean, they know I love them. That, hey, and I'm able to say, hey, my story. I'm not judging you,
right?
But there's got to be something better than this. Like
so
in premarital counseling.
Suggest people like that couple to do Regen? Do you have Regen? Do you have couples in Regen?
Well, we have Reengage, which is our marriage ministry.
Okay.
It's put out by the same church, Watermark in Dallas. So both of them, the curriculum is rooted in transparency.
Okay.
And so it fits hand in glove with who we are as a church.
Right.
And so what it's doing is it's actually pushing the value of transparency throughout the church. And so with our staff, always pushing, hey, if you're speaking churchy language, I'm calling you out.
Right.
Like I don't speak churchy language. If there's another way to say it, I'm going to say it. Or if I use a churchy word, I'm going to take a second and say, hey,
let me explain it.
Yeah, let me explain what that means in 30 seconds. This will be a very, it's an incomplete definition, but just so you'll have it in your mind.
Right.
Because too many people are sitting in churches nodding along and they have no idea what's going on.
Sure.
And we've got to, I think in the name of, I want people to think I'm intelligent. I'm going to quote a bunch of dead guys. I'm going to use a lot of highbrow theological terms so that people will be impressed with me. And honestly, while I'm a people pleaser on Sunday mornings in 40 minutes on stage, I could care less what you think. I've got to bring it down to talk to the least informed person in the room.
Right.
Because the most informed person is going to get it, but they're probably not living it anyway. So, a bigger percentage of our room than we want to admit.
Right.
Probably are lost and don't even know it.
Sure. They're
more the Matthew 7 where Jesus is going to go, I don't know who you are. And so,
yeah, wow, that's scary.
This call to, hey, I know this seems simple, but here's my question. Did you live it this week?
Right.
And so we're going to speak from a platform that, I'm never going to be accused of being over anybody's head, either physically or otherwise. And so it's again, it may not be for everybody, but I know what God has called us to do. And, and we've baptized a whole whole bunch of people over the last few years.
Yeah.
And just transform lives.
My favorite, I spoke at your youth winter camp, and there was a little girl there that was she was in a rescue home for children
Mm-hmm.
that have been rescued out of sex trafficking. And at camp with us, she gave her heart to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a text from one of your staff saying, "Hey, you need to know she's getting baptized this weekend." And I was like, okay, I can't be there, but I'm going to watch. And I watched, like, it makes me want to cry. I'm watching this little girl. And I know that people do this. They do it for a lot of people, but for some reason, this one was so special to me. So many of the students and student leaders and people rallied around her. You almost couldn't see the tank in which she was being dunked because everybody was up there. And they weren't up there to say, "Look, we know her." They were up there to say, "Hey, we know you. We see you, and we're excited about what's happening in your life. And we see what God has redeemed you from. And we are your hype people right now." And she was just glowing, and she was just sobbing and so thankful. And your youth pastor, Sean, she almost pulled him into the tank. I was like, "What is happening? This is amazing." But it was so...
Well, he's lost. We needed him to get baptized too. So I had asked her, "Hey, when you're done, can you take care of him?"
Pull him in. But it was such a precious but heartfelt moment. And you didn't have to know her story to know there was a story. And yet God's redemption is so powerful that her story just changed.
Well, last week,
I love it.
Last week on our first Wednesday, we have a prayer service the first Wednesday of every month.
Yeah.
And it's very spirit driven. I very seldom plan much because I just want it to kind of be.
It's prayer and worship, right?
Yeah. So we worship probably for 3/4 of it. And there's a prayer, there ends up being a prayer focus, but on this night, I had Isaiah 6. This was last Wednesday night. I had Isaiah 6 kind of in my time with the Lord that morning. I'd been there, in the year Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, this grand vision of God.
And lifted up, right?
So I'm walking people through having a grander vision of God, awesome God. We're praying through that. And I felt the Lord say, "Hey, open up the mic." So I am anti-open mic.
Facts. And you...
yes. I mean, I was in student ministry for a long time.
Yes.
Leading worship for students. And
yes.
We're in some very, very...
My hands are getting sweaty.
Oh, yeah. I mean...
No.
Yeah,
no open mics.
Yeah. And so I had a mic sitting next to me, and I told people, "Hey, I feel like God wants to do something right now. And I just, full disclosure, I am anti-open mic. But I want to open up the mic, and if God has done something awesome in your life recently, I just want you to come share it with us." So for the next 30 minutes, people were coming up, and I told them, "Hey, please be brief. Like, please don't take us back into, we don't need to know the name of your third grade teacher." So people are coming and sharing, and then this girl comes up. She's probably in her late 30s, maybe early 40s. And she sat down next to me. I didn't know her. And she said, "Yeah, I came to church for the first time on Sunday, talking about drug addiction and how she kept drifting in and out of it, that she would go through rehab and she was better, but then she would drift back into it." And just talking about, she goes, "I always know when it's bad because I drift into isolation." And,
wow.
and I'm just thinking, well, she gets it,
Right.
I mean, but she said, "I'm determined for it to be different this time." And I could just feel she's crying while she's talking. And she was the only one that I said, "Hey, I need several people, elders. Let's pray over her." So we gathered her and we prayed over her. And then I just felt a prompting from the Spirit. She's going to sit down. And I said, "Hey, I need 10 women before you leave tonight to go exchange numbers with her. And I need you to text her every day so that she knows that she's not alone." And We moved on.
Was Sheila there that night?
Sheila, turns out, Sheila was her AA sponsor. She did not know that. And she comes in the church and she hears Sheila, because everyone hears Sheila.
Yes.
And Sheila has now gotten her into Regen. So she was at Regen for the first time on Monday night. So all of this is
just... For those of you who don't know Sheila, she is a lady that you will, if you ever watch them online, you hear her, but she loves Jesus probably more than anybody in the world, doesn't she?
Because,
her testimony is amazing.
Talking about baptism, I mean, I have everybody share, kind of their story. Why are you being baptized today?
Right.
And you can go online and find Sheila, find her story, because she tells it in the story that we filmed of her. But she basically said, this is my second baptism. My first baptism was in a hotel room, and my drug dealer was drowning me in the bathtub. And I had my drug of choice in one hand, and I'm dying and just underwater. I said, God save me. I don't want to live this life anymore. I dropped my drug of choice. He pulled me up and walked out, and I never saw him again. And so she's sharing this, and all the kids have come in there, and you literally see everybody like. So, I mean, Sheila, she's something. But you know what? He who's been loved much loves much. And that woman, she loves Jesus and she loves people, and she just can't get over it. So to kind of land the plane, we feel like, I've never considered myself innovative. I'm not looking to reinvent church. I don't think that we have the formula that makes it all work. I know that God has called me, because I was such a liar and manipulator for so many years, to have just a rabid connection with the truth.
I love that.
And so for me, part of my Ephesians 2:10 calling is to just speak truth at all times. And so I speak truth in a lot of settings. I'll speak truth in a counseling session. I'll speak truth.
But it's not just truth. It's truth in love.
Well, yeah.
I think we've got to remember that part, because some people are really good at speaking truth, but they destroy with that truth.
And that's where, I would say that in my past life, I would speak the truth dripping in sarcasm. So, sarcasm, I know it's not a spiritual gift, but I'm trying to retrofit it if I can.
I feel like I'm pretty fluent in it as well. So I have to work on it though.
I actually someone gave me a little sign that's sitting in my office that says fluent in sarcasm.
Yeah.
And Yvonne tells me that it's actually not funny. She doesn't.
I think she's so funny.
Oh, but she does not find, she's sarcastic now at times. And I'm like, girl, come on.
Yes, I know. Well, my first time, we were all at dinner together, and somebody at the table said something, and she was sitting right next to me, and she responded, and I thought it was so funny. And I'm like, I like her. Oh,
she literally,
so funny.
No kidding. She is the funniest person she knows. So when she says something, she'll laugh. Like, I'm usually laughing at her laughing at herself. But again, I love you, honey. I do.
I love you too. I think you're great.
You're awesome. So speaking the truth in love, in my past, I could shred somebody.
Yeah.
And today, people say things sometimes that I'm like, that is too easy. Like, that's low hanging fruit.
Right.
I could destroy you right now.
Yes.
But
finish them.
But yeah, exactly. Sweep the leg, Johnny. But I do know that God has given me such a heart for people.
Yeah.
That the most loving thing that I can do is go, hey man, that's killing you.
Yeah.
You know that, right? And again, when I say this a lot, hey, I'm not judging you. Like, just know that,
right.
You're going to do what you're going to do. If I were in your shoes, I'd rethink this and this.
Right.
That's literally killing you.
Yeah.
And you need to go home and tell your wife today.
Well, that I'm not judging you is disarming, because when people are guilty, they automatically assume everyone that knows they're guilty is in judgment. Right. And a lot of people are.
Yeah.
A lot of people are in judgment.
Yeah. So when I'm sitting in a counseling session, obviously, they know I'm a pastor. Have a lot of conversations out in the community. We were talking about this before we started today. I never tell people I'm a pastor, because things just get weird. As soon as they know that,
yes.
as soon as they know I'm a pastor, they're cleaning up their language. They're saying, "Oh, I used to go to church," or they just get this weird. I don't know what to do with my hands, and so I would rather just have real conversations with people,
right,
that are loving conversations, that are engaged conversations. And again, I ask people really hard questions, but I'm asking them hard questions coming from a guy that cares,
right,
not from a pastor.
right.
Because I don't want their filtered answer. I want their unfiltered answer because it reveals where their heart really is.
Sure.
Had this dude came to he found out his wife was having an affair. So he comes in, he's devastated.
Sure.
But he's angry. I nearly said pissed. So he's angry. Said it,
so there we go.
My bad. So he said, I'm angry. And so he probably dropped the F word probably 20 times.
Sure.
Over the hour he's there. And so I'm telling my life group about it that night. And I said, I felt like I needed to sanitize my office when he left. Because, he's just dropping F-bombs left and right. And so somebody said, well, that's disrespectful. And I'm like, what do you mean? What? He's cussing in the pastor's office? I was like, yeah. Really well, too. He was very proficient at it. Well, I just think that's disrespectful that he would cuss in front of the pastor. And I said, okay, well, I see it completely differently.
Sure.
Because that language is actually just symptomatic of his heart.
Right.
So I'm getting a glimpse into his heart. And if we continue to meet, one day he's going to cuss and apologize for it.
Right.
And then over time, if Jesus takes hold of his life, he'll stop using that language altogether.
Well, and it also says a lot about how safe he felt to just be authentic and not have to pretend.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Church it up.
So I know you don't tell people that you are a pastor when you're out, and I didn't tell you this, but we were, I was at a restaurant in the area and saw a young lady that I knew, and she introduced me to her mom. She was back home from college, and I just said, she said, yeah, and I said, well, are you guys in church anywhere here? And she goes, well, we've been church hopping, and she goes, we really like the church. Oh, what's it called? The pastor with the hair. I was like, pastor, and I said, oh, Restoration. And she said, yes. And I said, the fact that I know what you're talking about, the pastor with the hair, not that every other pastor is bald or doesn't have hair, but it was just the fact that I knew what she was talking about. I was like, Restoration. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, cool.
Do you ever see the memes that this is how I think I look, this is how I actually am? Yes. So like it would be me, it would be Brad Pitt, the guy from Up. So
the guy from Up.
Yeah. So I've got people that call me Carl Fredrickson, and I don't love it. Somebody on my staff team 3 days ago, something spilled and I was going to lean down and clean it up. And she goes, oh, you're like the staff grandpa. like, let me take care of that. And I'm like, I literally have a daughter your age. Like, I'm not a grandpa. She goes,
but
well,
you are a grandpa.
You are a grandpa. Yeah. I'm like, but not to you. Like, I could be your dad, not your grandpa. I was so offended. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just life.
I had a kid one time tell me, like 8 years old, he said, you're the same age as my grandma, I think. And I'm like,
no, I'm sure I'm not.
Your grandma? No. And this was a few years back. So I was like, I told Phil, I said, I've got to change like my moisturizer or something. I don't know. I've had like gray hair since I was 25. So it started coming in. Then I was too vain to let that show. So I colored it, so I was blonde during my 30s. You colored it. Do you use that just for men? In the commercials, hair dye?
I used it for, because I had a goatee for a while. So I used it for my goatee, my sideburns. But my sideburns within 4 days were white. And so I had blonde hair and the just for men only came in light brown. So it's like blonde hair, brown. And then this would stay a little longer. This would turn white. And so I was just kind of this multicolored Guy Fieri weirdness. Yeah. So I finally just said, okay, I'm done. It go. So now here I am. So I always say, okay, this doesn't tell the story. I'm super immature for my age. So, yeah, anyway.
Well, first of all, I would love to do another podcast about worship.
Let's do it.
I would love to. I think that would be great. I think that there's a lot. I think I would love to do a whole series on it because I think that it needs to be discussed. My question to you before we, as you said, land this plane, I've gotten to do a lot of things at your church. I've never been able to lead worship, and I want to know why. I'm just kidding.
Hey, here's what I'll say. Here's
that's the reason.
Let's talk about self-awareness. Have you ever seen American Idol? The auditions.
That's my favorite part is the auditions. It's like your mama told you were good, but she lied.
What we're going to do right now? We're going to do right now.
I'm not singing.
I want you to sing the verse and chorus of your favorite worship song, and then I am going to evaluate real time for everyone. I'm going to say what everyone's thinking because I speak the truth in love.
No, thank you, Pastor Greg, for being here today. When I get to heaven, the Bible says we'll know them as we knew them on earth. You're going to be like, that's Amber. And then when I sing, you're going to be like, wait, no, that's Tasha Cobbs. What is happening?
Hey, I can tell you 1,000% that's not going to happen.
In my heart. That's what I'm
Psalm 100, make a joyful noise unto the Lord.
So it's a noise. It's a noise.
I'm sure it is.
Well, yes. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate it.
Love it.
Thank you for your honesty and your authenticity. I think we all need to know it's a safe place to do that. And when we are authentic, that's when the Lord can use our brokenness to change the lives of people.
Well, thank you for having me.
For sure.
And, we believe deeply in one church.
Yeah.
And so there's so many great churches in the area.
Yeah.
I've got so many great relationships with pastors in the area.
Yeah.
And so, if you're listening to this in the kind of the Montgomery County, whether it be the Woodlands, Magnolia, Conroe, Montgomery, just know you're probably going to an incredible church.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a church home, come hang out with us.
If you're not going to an incredible church, find a church.
Yeah.
Find a church.
Find a church close to you. But if Restoration is within spitting distance, come hang out with us. We'd love to journey with you.
And the beautiful thing is, we were talking about this earlier. If you're curious, check them out online.
Yeah.
We were talking about people just showing up at church. I'm like, in today's time, there's not very many churches that you can't jump on and see what they're about. So
absolutely.
It's incredible. Thank you. All right. Y'all stick around for an extra shot. I'm Amber Noble, and you've been listening to Grounds for Conversations. To ensure you don't miss our next podcast, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Don't forget to hang around for an extra shot. All right, welcome back to this extra shot. Pastor Gray, tell us, did you like how I said that?
Yeah, I did. I thought you said Pastor Gray, and I was offended. And then I realized that you said Pastor Gray.
Well, don't be offended.
Because it's actually Pastor White. It ain't Gray. Yeah.
Okay, tell us what is, I don't know if you want to call it the funniest, the strangest, the most awkward thing because that's the reality. People don't realize that there's a lot of things that happen in church behind the scenes, people don't realize that it's just like, did that just happen? And fun fact, seminary does not prepare you for it.
Yeah.
Nothing prepares you for it. I don't care what they say. There's nothing that prepares you. So what is the funniest / weirdest, craziest thing that you've experienced?
I mean, the weirdest thing I've ever experienced did not happen in my church. I was at church and I experienced this. So I'm going to tell you that. But I mean, I experience like stupid things all the time because I say dumb things.
Yes.
Like a few weeks ago, I was talking about, when Syria I think it was Syria that tried to bomb Israel and the Iron Dome came up.
Yes.
And it happened on a Saturday night. So the next morning I said, hey, have you been following the news feed? But instead of news feed, I said, if you've been following the news feed, not nude feed, news feed. And so everybody's laughing. And I just keep saying nude feed over and over again. And I said, I mean, realistically, that's what landed some of you in regen. Okay. So news feed. And so
was this live?
Oh yeah, it was.
You're like, yes,
yeah.
yes.
It was on live stream and the whole world. But it drives Yvonne crazy because Yvonne's like, "Why did you just keep saying it over and over again?" I said, "Because honestly, it's comedy gold."
Yeah,
once
great.
Once I've blown it, I'm just gonna go.
Just gonna run with it.
Okay, that's parenthetical. Okay, the funniest thing I've ever seen. So every year for a few years when I was leading worship, Sunday after Christmas, I would take Sunday off and I would just kind of make a tour of churches. I would find out, I wanted to catch the worship sets as many churches between, 8 and noon as I could. So this morning I caught 3 different services. So
3 different churches.
Yeah, 3 different churches. Okay. One of them, a church in the area who I'm just going to go and name it, Celebration Church. They were meeting in Woodlands High School.
Okay.
So started at 10 o'clock. Me and my friend that went with me, we showed up at 10 o'clock. We pulled into the parking lot at Woodlands High School. They're meeting in the theater. And we get out and walking in. There's a dude walking in with an instrument case. And I look at my watch because I'm like, I thought it started at 10. And so they're pretty informal here that this cat's just going to show up and sit in with the band.
Yes.
So we go in and we go up in this theater and we're walking up. And I noticed this guy's walking up with us. So I move in. He's one row in front of me. So he is sitting right in front of me on the aisle. I'm a row behind him.
What kind of instrument?
Well, I'll get to that. Yeah. So we start worship, and worship is going, and they're pretty charismatic, so they're rocking it. They get to the end of the song and go into kind of a prophetic moment, right, where everybody's kind of broken down and they're kind of singing their own song and everything. And granted, they've just started, so there's 75 people in the room or so. I mean, it's not very full, and we're up in the back half.
So this was quite a few years ago.
Oh yeah, this is like 2005, 6, somewhere around there. So all of a sudden I look in front of me and this dude opens up this case and pulls out a trumpet. He starts working those valves, and all of a sudden he's like, he's trying to find the key that they're in. And then he finally finds the key and he just starts soloing. He's going off. So I started laughing because I'm like, what is going on right now? I look down on stage and the band's kind of like looking at each other like, get into the next song. So they transitioned into the next song immediately.
Did they not think he was going to transition with them?
Well, they didn't know what was happening. They're just trying to get the music going again. Well, so he puts it down, but it doesn't put it away. He's still holding it in his hand.
Yeah, because he's not done.
He's waiting for the next moment.
He's ready.
Well, so now I see this guy starts moving up. He's been on the front row, and so now he's like walking up. He's walking up the steps. He's getting closer to me, and he's got an earpiece in, which I thought funny. I mean, you got 75 people here, right?
Right.
But whatever.
You get Secret Service. Here we go.
Yeah. So he's coming up and he walks up and he's looking at me. And I'm looking back at him like, bro, that was not me. And I didn't go. So I'm just standing watching what's about to happen. The dude walks up and he turns. And again, we're right on the aisle. And he just stands next to the guy. Doesn't say a word to him, just stands next to him. Guy's working those valves. Into the next song, he goes, whoop. Guy reaches over, leans over and says, put it away. The guy puts it down. And now I'm laughing so hard that I can't stay. I go, dude, we have to go. Because now I'm going to be the distraction. And so we left, but a dude pulls out a trumpet in church.
Well, what that tells you about Celebration is even though they have so much freedom, they have order. Thank God. You know?
Yeah. So,
oh my goodness.
I mean, at the end of the day, that was like the weirdest thing I've ever seen, that a dude felt free. Earlier we were talking about, tambourines.
Right.
Our
friend Kieran Sims loves tambourines. So just if you like to go here.
So we used to have a lady at Woodside. She showed up and she was playing a tambourine, and it was the loudest thing in the room, and she had no rhythm. And so, I had to tell her, hey, you can't play a tambourine in church.
Right.
The room is too small. It's too loud. And she was so hurt and offended, but I felt like Simon Cowell, like, who told you could sing, And so, by the way, we'd love to hear a verse and chorus of something. Just real quick.
This is not what this is about.
Oceans? Do you know Oceans? That is my least favorite worship song. So this could be the double whammy.
You want to know what my least favorite is?
Oceans.
No. Good Father.
Oh.
I don't, because it's like, it's who you are, it's who you are. Okay, we get it. Move on. They say it's who you are like 19 times.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
I mean,
I love the meaning behind it.
Yeah, but Chris Tomlin made it famous. He did not write it, by the way.
Well,
but he made it famous.
It's when you hear people who shouldn't probably be leading worship.
Yeah.
It's who you are, and it's flat, and it just continues.
Hey, do it in a room full of orphans and see how it goes over.
Oh, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard.
I know. It's like playing Arms of an Angel, hold up that sad puppy. Yeah. I mean, it's a tough room.
That's the saddest thing I've ever heard.
Was that inappropriate to say? Yeah. Well, I'm only laughing because you're laughing.
Because I'm like, what in the world?
No, okay. I was at a camp for foster kids, and the worship leader started playing Good Father, and I'm like, hey, dude, read the room.
Have you seen there was this is awful. Forgive us. There is this.
Hey, I feel like we need to cut this real quick. This is
great.
Hey, come to Restoration.
There's this thing where there was this, I guess these college kids doing this sports camp. And it was special needs kids. And this little girl came up and she didn't have arms. And so she did the thing, and the guy went up to high five her, and then he didn't know what to do, so he pats her on the head. I don't know. Okay, here's what I think my spiritual gift is paying attention to awkward moments. I don't know if that's a spiritual gift, but people are like, Amber, that's funny. I'm like, no, I just pay attention. It's always happening.
Well, I mean, if you're willing to look, listen, and repeat it.
Right.
You can be a comedian. Think about all comedians do is observe what's going on.
They tell stories.
Nate Bargatze.
He's my favorite.
He is my favorite.
He is,
and the dude,
so funny.
All he does is tell stories.
Did you hear his whole piece on when he went to that serpentarium? That's my favorite.
Oh yeah.
I went and looked. Phil was like, look it up. Because he's telling it, we look it up. You can find the review. That place has since been shut down.
Oh yeah. He did an update in the Tennessee Kid in that Netflix special. Yeah. Here's an update on the Serpentarium. Yeah. So Yvonne won't let me talk about her on stage. Can I say
thank you that you don't get up there and go, my smoking hot wife? Because when pastors say that, I'm like, I just want to go, boo.
I know. She is.
She's beautiful.
She's.
But you don't make it to where everybody in the whole church turns to look at her.
Yeah, I mean, I say bona fide hottie, but it doesn't matter. But she doesn't like because if something happens, I'm like, babe, please
let me tell this story.
Comedy gold,
right?
I mean, I gotta tell the story,
right?
But she says no. But since we're on here, let me tell you, she'll probably never watch this, right?
She totally will.
Okay.
She's probably going to watch this to make sure you don't do what you're about to do.
Hey, I would never. Yeah.
Okay, so you had a trumpet. Have you ever been to a church, and maybe because they had it planned, have you ever been in a church where you were not prepared for that somebody had a shofar?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've had this shofar. I thought you were going to say where you just weren't prepared.
No.
Well, I mean, that happens from time to time. I don't know why we need to talk about it right now. I mean, I've had dreams, like a recurring dream of showing up. Why is that funny?
Is this therapy? Are we going
I'm like, I'm a pervert sometimes. I mean, I wing it sometimes. I mean, it's not always. Most of the time it's from the Lord. Most of the time. I would say, I'm going to say 58% of the time. No, I kid.
But okay, so
the shofar is.
When you don't know, obviously the pastors and everybody knew it was happening. And I was at it was a worship conference. I love worship so much, but I don't believe worship is just song. I believe it's just the cry of your heart, right? And it's
like
before the Lord, like a shofar. Well, where the church, the sanctuary was kind of shaped like a crest. The stage was like a crescent.
Yeah.
So, it was, but it was real weird because it was real deep. So, I was way over here on the side. A friend of mine and I.
Did you have your eyes closed when the shofar
yes,
went off?
and here's the thing.
And you thought it was like the civil defense siren?
No, because I grew up Pentecostal.
Oh.
So it was the rapture. I'm not playing. I'm not playing. Seriously.
Still have my clothes on.
I was a lot younger and went with my friend and we're sitting there, have my eyes closed, and I was like, I'm like, here we go.
Yeah.
And then I see this guy with this ram horn and I'm like, bro, like, where do you get that?
Hey,
like, do they sell those at Guitar Center? Like, where did you get that?
Yvonne did say that she like woke up and I had gotten out of bed at some point and she reached over and I wasn't there. And she said, one of my thoughts was, did the rapture happen?
Oh,
and then she said, but your clothes weren't laying there. So I knew. And I'm like, you think we're all going to be naked and have like.
Well, because that's the way, like church kids. We used to play those games on our cousins. We would not play.
What?
For
okay,
real.
Tell me about the games you played where your clothes were off.
We were at my grandma's house and we'd been playing and my cousin and I were joking about something and she got real mad. So we all went and we changed and we took the clothes we had on and we laid them in the living room. And we hid. And when she came in, it looked like the rapture. She was so upset.
Hey, that is like church kid 101. There's some of you out here like, well, I started smoking weed when I was 9. And she's like, we laid out our clothes to scare people.
Yes, but I also grew up in the era of Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Everything was about getting terrified in church.
So I did a youth camp once that they played that game, where you had to memorize these verses, and so then you had to find someone to quote them to, and it was kind of growing. But every like 3 minutes they were saying, hey, there's a plane crash. If you were born in the month of January, you're dead. So people are dying before they can share the verses. So they went to hell. So they had this cabin that they put space heaters in and blacked all the windows. And so if you went to hell, they hotboxed you, basically. Well, not hotboxed you like, that's a different term in today's world. But they stuck you in a cabin. They stuck you in a cabin with space heaters in the summer. It's 90 degrees outside and 110 in here. And these kids are in there for like an hour and a half sweating. If you went to heaven, they had like all of this food. Like kids are in there eating Twinkies and fruit and just living it up. And these poor kids are in there sweating. The dude got fired.
Sure.
He got back to camp, got fired, called me and said, hey man, do you know anybody hiring? And I'm like, why? He goes, can you believe they fired me over that? I'm like, oh, yeah, I believe it.
Yes.
You stuck a bunch of kids in a room.
In hell.
Yeah. You literally put them in hell. Yeah. So, seen lots of weird stuff.
Okay. The trumpet.
Yeah.
I'm going to just take this, and if you can't answer it, don't answer it. What's the weirdest thing someone has said to you at church? Whether it's at your church or just like some of the weirdest things you've heard.
Oh, gosh. That's put me on the spot. Weirdest things I've heard. I mean, I've got these garden variety. Like, when I was leading worship, people would say, hey, what do you do for a living? I say, I'm the worship pastor at Woods Edge. And they go, oh, that's a full-time job?
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Okay. I'm like, well, and then, my closest friends would be like, hey man, after you pick those 5 songs, what else did you do this week?
Yeah. And you're like, meet me in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Let me show you.
Well, truthfully, nothing. But I figured out something to do. No, I mean, hey, this is true. And, Jeff, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. But there were times that I would go to church, turn the lights on in my office and leave. So if someone came looking for me, they were like, well, I know he's here somewhere. And I went to the reality movies a couple times. I did.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That being said, a lot of times
that was
people think,
before. If you didn't watch the rest of the podcast,
go back.
There was a time I was pretty dark, and I'm not anymore.
But a lot of people think that's what pastors do, and the reality is, pastors' work is 24/7.
Oh gosh, I mean, today I feel like, I would never tell my staff that, because I think some of them would take me up on it.
Some of your staff watch this podcast.
Yeah, well, hey, if your lights are on and you ain't in your office, I will find you. I will find you. Because that whole term, you can't be SBSer.
Yeah.
I had to tell my middle daughter that often. I'm like, hey, so if you asked me what time I was going to be home, and like I was at a Cowboy game one time, she calls me and she's like, hey, are you having a good time? I'm like, mm-hmm. So I'm in Dallas. She's in Houston.
Right.
Oh, cool. I'm so glad you're having a good time. What time do you think you'll be home? Said, we'll roll in about 2:00. So I immediately am like, hey guys, let's go. Like, because I know she's up to something. So I get home at 2 a.m. on the dot. I go in the house. TV's on in the living room, but it's dark. Nobody's in there. I go up to her room. She had friends over. And I go up to the room, empty. She's not there. I call her. What are you doing? They were out wandering in the neighborhood. She's a teenager. I don't actually know what she was doing. I've never gotten to the bottom of that. But she gets home. Of course, she gets grounded. Her friends get in trouble, and blah, blah, blah. So the next day I'm driving in the car and I'm like, hey, can I just ask a functional question? If I tell you I'm going to be home at 2 and I show up at 2, you had from like 10 o'clock to 2 to do whatever you wanted. Why wouldn't you be at home at 2 a.m.? And her wheels are turning, almost like, and then I said, as every good father should do, good father should do.
It's who you are. It's who you are. Yeah, it's who you are.
I'm like, how dumb are you?
Oh, God.
Like, seriously. And that falls under the guise of, you can't be SBS, or like, but that's just dumb. I told you when I was going to be home.
But I told you. But that's okay. People, the kids, like, you're not thinking this through. What I think is so funny is Katie is such a cool person, and she's got these 3 gorgeous girls and this little boy on the way.
Oh yeah, and she is redeemed, by the way. Oh, she's the best mom. She is the most engaged parent. She's
a fantastic human. Man.
Oh yeah, and I'm like,
but she's got 4 children that they think they're going to be able to get one over on their mama. Gosh. They won't stand a chance.
Oh no. So we're just saying, people said to me, I don't know, people just confess stuff to me all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say what they say to me.
No,
because,
please don't.
Yeah,
please don't.
You would be like, oh, why did you just repeat it? But yeah, I mean, people tell you some stuff for sure. And, and they will confess their deepest, darkest things that you're like, whew. I mean, I have learned the art of, nothing really surprises me anymore because so much weird stuff has happened. But I've learned the art of just like, okay.
But you know what I do love is that you're not going to be the kind of person that takes what they confess and go tell other people. I grew up.
Well,
stop.
Except for this one thing.
No. I grew up in a culture where they had the women would call each other and they're like, we need to pray for Amber. Oh, yeah. And it was just a gossip train, and you're like, golly.
No, I'm actually just writing all them down, and I'm going to release the book the day I die.
Oh my gosh.
So it'll go out when I die. So it'll just be kind of like, hey, hope you work through this.
But chapter 3 is all about you and your family.
Yeah, you'll know. Did you ever see the movie The Help? Miss Hilly's Pies?
Well,
that's all I'm saying.
Here's the funny thing. All these parents think that they keep things under wrap. If they have children under the age of 8, every person in children's ministry knows what's going on in that family because there's a prayer time.
Oh, yeah.
And those kids confess all the things.
So I was at a funeral. So this is my oldest granddaughter, 8 years old. I was at a funeral a few months ago, and it was the most bizarre event. But the pastor that preached the funeral was a friend of the pastor that was supposed to preach the funeral. So he knew no one, but he showed up because the guy couldn't get here from out of state. And so, and it was at our church. So I was just kind of hosting it.
Right.
So I prayed at the beginning. And so now I'm just sitting there. And so he comes up and he says, hey, before I get started, my wife's going to sing a song. Well, no one knows his wife. The funeral's programmed, but she decides she's going to sing a song. So she gets up she just walks up in front of the stage and sings His Eyes on the Sparrow a cappella. And so if you've grown up in church, like the woman that sings that is trying to start a car. Mm-hmm. I sing because I'm happy. So she's singing. She's 5 feet from me. Well, my granddaughter is leaning up against me, coloring. She's 8 years old, and she's coloring.
Why was she at the funeral?
Well, because it was a family member.
Okay.
And so I just take her to funerals.
Oh, it's like,
hey, one day you're going to die. So let's just kind of, so she's coloring and she's singing. All of a sudden, she just turns around and looks at me and she just goes, And I'm like, no. Because she's like, from me to you. There's no way she didn't hear it. But that out of the mouths of babes,
that's right? And she wasn't being ugly. She's just saying what she heard. Middle
granddaughter, Brooklyn, who just speaks truth. Talking to a buddy of mine in the lobby one night, she walks up and she goes, "You look like an elephant." And he goes, "Why?" "Because your ears are so big." And he didn't know what to say. So he goes, "Well, yeah, they are kind of big." And I could just go, "Sorry, bro." I mean, what do you say? Like it already happened, and she just turned and ran off.
Yeah,
like a terrorist. Yes. And I'm like, what in the world just happened? Hit and run. Yeah. So if you have any kind of physical abnormality, I'd like to introduce you to Brooklyn. I won't say anything to you, but she'll get to the bottom of it quickly. No filter. Yeah. Yeah.
And also, if you have a trumpet.
Yes.
We would like to invite you to Restoration Church this next Sunday.
Yeah. What's funny is Frankie Mazzapica, the pastor of Celebration, he came to an event at Woods Edge like a few months after this happened. And I didn't know him, but I knew his face because they have billboards at Woodlands Mall since 1997. It's amazing.
Okay.
But so I saw him and I'm like, "Hey, you're Frankie,
You're the
right?"
mall guy.
Yeah, I said, "You're Frankie, right?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Hey, I'm Greg. I'm the worship pastor here." And I'm like, "Hey, bro, I just need you to know, I was at your church a couple months ago, the morning the trumpet guy." And he goes, "You were there? Was that not insane?" And I think it was probably more normal than he was admitting to. Yeah.
Well, we know Sarah.
That was my cousin.
Sarah is there.
Oh, yeah.
She's amazing.
She's unbelievable. Crystal Williams.
Yeah.
You don't know her.
Yes.
Amazing singer.
Yes.
Yeah. Great worship.
I've done a couple services where she's led worship and I taught, and then she did the altar call.
She went through our David Project program.
She's
in 2006.
amazing.
She is ridiculous.
She could sing the paint off the wall.
A
lot of times people say her and I sound alike.
By the way, I feel like that I just kind of took credit for how good she is by saying she went through David Project. She showed up great.
Right.
And left just as great.
Well,
yeah, we did very little to help.
I will take credit because she sings like I do.
So okay. So before we go.
No, we're out of time.
Yeah.
Just
Oceans. Sing Oceans. It's my least favorite song.
Why is it your least favorite?
I don't know. There's just something about it that I just don't like.
Are you afraid of the water?
No. Well, no. I don't think.
What if we mashed up Oceans and Good Father?
Oh, you're a good ocean?
No, I'm going to figure out how to do it. I'm going to figure out how to do it.
Spirit, lead me where my trust is without fathers.
Sing that to your orphans.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Hey,
this was so funny to me.
I hope this gets edited out.
No, none of it.
Yeah,
none of it. It's awesome. Hey, thank you for being here. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
See you soon.